The for sale sign loomed before me like a neon-lit accusation. I blinked, certain my eyes were playing tricks after the long drive. But there it was, brazen as sin, stuck right in the middle of our perfectly manicured lawn. What in God's name? I muttered, fumbling with my seatbelt. I barely remembered to turn off the engine before stumbling out of the car, my legs stiff from the hours on the road. The front door flew open before I reached it. Ethan stood there, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Welcome home, Maggie," he drawled, as if this were any ordinary day. "Ethan, why is there a for sale sign on our lawn? What have you done?" My voice cracked, betraying the panic rising in my chest. He shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "I took care of it. You should thank me." "Thank you," I sputtered, pushing past him into the house. "I've been gone for 3 weeks, caring for my parents, and you decide to sell our home without even telling me?" The living room was eerily bare, devoid of the personal touches that had made it ours. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed Sylvia, Ethan's mother, perched on our not ours anymore sofa, looking like the cat that got the cream. "Margaret, dear," she purred. "We didn't want to bother you while you were playing nurse." Ethan and I handled everything. I whirled to face my husband, searching his eyes for any hint of remorse. There was none. "Everything," I echoed, my mind reeling. "Ethan, how could you possibly sell this house without my signature?" He exchanged a glance with his mother, and I felt my world tilt on its axis. "Oh, Maggie," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "you really should pay more attention to what you sign." The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had been planning this, waiting for the right moment, and I, fool that I was, had handed it to them on a silver platter. "Where's the money?" I demanded, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. Sylvia's laugh was like broken glass. Now, Margaret, you wouldn't begrudge your hard-working husband a little financial freedom, would you?" I stood there, surrounded by the emptiness of what was once my home, facing the 2 people I should have been able to trust above all others. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke with a gnawing pit in my stomach. Sleep had been elusive, my mind racing with questions and disbelief. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I marched into our home office, or what was left of it. Most of Ethan's things were gone, but our filing cabinet remained. I yanked open the drawer, rifling through documents until I found what I was looking for: the deed to our house. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. There, at the bottom, was my signature, or rather a crude imitation of it. The forgery was obvious to me, but would it hold up legally? My breath caught in my throat as I noticed the notary stamp. How deep did this deception go? I grabbed my phone, dialing our family lawyer with trembling fingers. "Jack? It's Maggie. I need your help. Ethan sold our house without my consent. They forged my signature on the deed." Jack's sharp intake of breath told me all I needed to know. "Maggie, this is serious. We need to act fast. Can you come to my office right away?" As I drove to Jack's office, memories flooded back. The day we bought this house, Ethan had been so proud, so loving. "This is our future, Mags," he'd said, squeezing my hand. How had we gone from that to this? Jack's face was grim as he examined the documents. "Maggie, I'm sorry, but this goes beyond a simple forgery. The notary stamp. It's from a notary who passed away 6 months ago. This is fraud on multiple levels." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you saying, Jack?" He leaned forward, his eyes filled with concern. "I'm saying that Ethan and Sylvia didn't just betray you. They've committed serious crimes. We need to involve the authorities." As the weight of his words sank in, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Hope you're not planning anything stupid, Mags. Remember, I've got friends in high places. Don't make this messier than it needs to be." I showed Jack the message, my hands shaking. He frowned, then said quietly, "Maggie, there's something else you should know. I've been doing some digging. The money from the house sale. It's gone. All of it." I stared at him, stunned. "Gone? How? Where?" Jack shook his head. That's what we need to find out. But Maggie, be prepared. This might get ugly. As I left Jack's office, my mind reeling, I spotted a familiar car across the street. Sylvia sat behind the wheel, her eyes fixed on me, a cold smile playing on her lips. I realized then that this was just the beginning. The battle for justice and my future was about to begin in earnest. I stood on Sylvia's porch, my heart pounding. The last place I wanted to be was here, but I needed answers. I knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet suburban street. Sylvia opened the door, her face a mask of false concern. "Margaret, dear, what a surprise." I pushed past her into the house. "Where's Ethan?" Now, Sylvia cooed. "Let's not be rude." That's when I saw them, my things, piled haphazardly in the corner of Sylvia's living room. My wedding album lay open, pages torn. Rage boiled inside me. "What is this?" I demanded, gesturing at the mess. Ethan emerged from the kitchen, a smirk on his face. "Just clearing out some clutter, Mags. You understand." I lunged for the pile, desperate to salvage what I could. Sylvia's laughter cut through me like a knife. "Oh, Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Did you really think Ethan married you for love? We needed your family's connections, dear. Nothing more." I froze, looking at Ethan. His eyes were cold, unfamiliar. "Is that true?" He shrugged. "You were always so caught up in your own world, Maggie. Did you ever stop to think about what I wanted? What I needed? What you needed?" I sputtered. "I gave you everything. Everything except respect," he spat. "Always lording your family's status over me. Well, now we're even." Sylvia clapped her hands together. "And now, dear, it's time for you to go. Ethan has some papers for you to sign." Ethan produced a thick envelope. "Divorce papers, Mags. I'm done living in your shadow." I stared at the envelope, then at the two of them, their faces twisted with cruel satisfaction. In that moment, something inside me hardened. "You think this is over?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what's coming." Ethan's smirk faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You'll see. Both of you." As I walked away, I heard Sylvia's shrill voice. "You ungrateful little dash." The door slammed behind me, cutting off her words. I got into my car, hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. They thought they'd won, that they'd broken me. But they had no idea of the storm that was about to hit them. I pulled out my phone, dialing Jack's number. "It's me," I said when he answered. "I'm ready to fight back. Whatever it takes." I sat in Jack's office, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me, but I knew it was necessary. "Are you sure about this, Maggie?" Jack asked, his eyes filled with concern. I nodded, my jaw set. "They need to know the truth, Jack. All of it." He sighed, reaching for his phone. "All right, I'll call them in." 20 minutes later, Ethan and Sylvia burst into the office, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. "What's the meaning of this?" Ethan demanded. I stood facing them both. "It's time you learned exactly what you've done." Sylvia scoffed. "Oh, please. We know what we did. We outsmarted you, dear." I couldn't help but smile, which seemed to unsettle them. "Did you? Let me ask you something, Ethan. Did you ever wonder why my parents were so generous to you? Why they helped us buy that house?" He frowned, glancing at his mother. "What are you talking about?" I turned to Jack, who nodded and pulled out a document. "This," I said, "is the true deed to our house. The one my parents had drawn up 5 years ago." Ethan snatched the paper, his eyes widening as he read. Sylvia peered over his shoulder, her face paling. "That's right," I continued, my voice steady. "My parents transferred ownership of the house to you, Ethan. It was meant to be a surprise for our 10th anniversary, a gesture of trust and love." The silence in the room was deafening. Ethan looked up at me, shock written all over his face. But that means..." "It means," Jack interjected, "that when you sold the house, you were selling your own property. The forged documents were unnecessary. And more importantly, it means you're fully liable for the fraud you committed." Sylvia's knees buckled, and she collapsed into a chair. "This can't be happening," she muttered. I stepped closer to Ethan, looking him straight in the eye. "You didn't just betray me, Ethan. You betrayed the trust my entire family placed in you. And for what? Money? Status?" He couldn't meet my gaze, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "We all did. And this is how you repaid that trust." As I turned to leave, Ethan grabbed my arm. "Maggie, wait. I didn't know. We can fix this, can't we?" I gently removed his hand. "No, Ethan. We can't. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed." With that, I walked out of the office, leaving behind the shattered remains of what I once thought was my future. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was out, and now, finally, I could start to rebuild. I stood on my parents' porch, my hand hovering over the doorbell. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. But I knew I needed them now more than ever. The door swung open before I could ring, and there stood my mother, Helen, her eyes wide with concern. "Maggie, sweetheart, we've been so worried." I fell into her arms, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. She held me tight, stroking my hair like she did when I was a little girl. "Come inside, dear," she said softly, guiding me to the living room where my father, Robert, was waiting. As I sat down, the whole story poured out of me. The betrayal, the fraud, the confrontation with Ethan and Sylvia. My parents listened in stunned silence, their faces a mix of anger and heartbreak. When I finished, my father leaned forward, his voice tight with emotion. "Maggie, I'm so sorry. We never meant for our gift to cause you such pain." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, Dad. You couldn't have known what Ethan would do." My mother took my hand. "What do you need from us, sweetheart? Just name it." I took a deep breath. I need to start over. But I don't know how. Everything I had, everything I thought I knew, it's all gone." My father stood up, pacing the room. "Not everything, Maggie. You still have us, and you still have your strength. We'll help you rebuild." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack. "Ethan's trying to transfer assets. We need to act fast." I felt a surge of panic. "They're still trying to take everything," I said, showing my parents the message. My mother's eyes hardened. "Then we fight back. Together." My father nodded. "We'll call in every favor, use every resource we have. You won't face this alone, Maggie." As I looked at their determined faces, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me. But with it came a realization. To truly move forward, I would have to make a decision that would change everything. I said slowly, I think I need to file for divorce and press charges against Ethan and Sylvia." The room fell silent. My parents exchanged a look, then turned back to me. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" my mother asked gently. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. "Yes, it's the only way to protect myself and make sure they can't hurt anyone else." My father squeezed my shoulder. "Then that's what we'll do. We're with you every step of the way." As I sat there, surrounded by the love and support of my parents, I knew the road ahead would be tough. But for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to face it. The time for tears was over. Now it was time to fight. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. Today was the day everything would change. The divorce proceedings were about to begin, and I was ready to face Ethan and Sylvia one last time. As I walked in, I saw them huddled together, whispering furiously. The moment they spotted me, Sylvia's face contorted with rage, while Ethan's eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. "You've ruined everything," Sylvia hissed as I passed. I ignored her, focusing on the task ahead. But as we entered the courtroom, I noticed something off about Ethan. He looked desperate. The proceedings began, and our lawyers presented their cases. But halfway through, Ethan suddenly stood up, his face pale. "I can't do this anymore," he blurted out. "I need to tell the truth." The room fell silent. I held my breath, not daring to hope. "It was all my mother's idea," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "She convinced me to sell the house, to forge Maggie's signature. I was weak. I let my jealousy and her manipulation cloud my judgment." Sylvia leapt to her feet, screeching, "You ungrateful boy! After everything I've done for you." The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Ethan's confession had changed everything. As we took a recess, I found myself face to face with Ethan in the hallway. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "Maggie, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I regret everything." I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, hurt, and a tiny flicker of the love I once felt for him. But I knew I couldn't let it sway me. "It's too late, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choice." As I turned to walk away, Sylvia appeared, her eyes wild with fury. "You think this is over?" she spat. "I'll make sure you never see a penny of that money. I'll ruin you, just like you've ruined my son." Something inside me snapped. All the pain, all the betrayal of the past weeks came rushing to the surface. I stepped closer to Sylvia, my voice low and dangerous. "Listen carefully," I said. "You've already lost. Your schemes, your manipulation. It's all crumbling around you. And if you try to come after me or my family again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." Sylvia's face paled, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. She stumbled backward, nearly falling. As I walked back into the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The battle wasn't over, but I knew I had the strength to see it through. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on. The day I'd been both dreading and longing for had finally arrived. As I stood before the judge, my heart raced. This was it, the final hearing to end my marriage to Ethan. I glanced across the courtroom. Ethan sat alone, Sylvia conspicuously absent. His confession had driven a wedge between them, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. The judge's gavel echoed through the room. "In light of Mr. Thompson's confession and the evidence presented, this court grants the divorce and orders full restitution to Mrs. Thompson for all assets fraudulently obtained."
Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As we filed out of the courtroom, Ethan approached me, his eyes red-rimmed. "Maggie, please," he pleaded. "I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Just one last time?" Against my better judgment, I nodded. We found a quiet corner, and Ethan's words tumbled out. "I was so blinded by jealousy, by my mother's poison. I threw away the best thing in my life. I'm so sorry, Maggie. I know it's too late, but I need you to know that." I felt a familiar ache in my chest, memories of happier times threatening to surface. But I steeled myself. "You're right, Ethan. It is too late." As I turned to leave, a commotion erupted near the courtroom doors. Sylvia burst in, her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful wench," she screamed, lunging at me. "You've destroyed my family." Security guards rushed to restrain her, but not before she managed to grab my arm, her nails digging into my skin. In that moment, facing Sylvia's unbridled hatred, something inside me snapped. The years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "No, Sylvia," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You destroyed your family. Your manipulation, your greed, your toxic influence, that's what tore everything apart. And now you're left with nothing." Sylvia's face crumpled, the fight draining out of her. As the guards led her away, I saw the truth of my words sink in. I walked out of the courthouse, my legs shaky but my resolve stronger than ever. The warm sunlight on my face felt like a promise of better days to come. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. "It's over, sweetheart. Come home. We're waiting for you." As I drove to my parents' house, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, hope. The life I had known was gone, shattered by betrayal and lies. But from the ashes, I knew a new life was waiting to be built. I pulled into the driveway, seeing my parents on the porch, their arms open wide. In that moment, I realized that while I had lost a husband and an in-law, I had rediscovered the unshakable foundation of my family's love. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, one built on truth, respect, and the enduring power of real family bonds. 6 months after the divorce, I stood in the kitchen of my parents' home, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. The aroma of freshly baked muffins filled the air, Mom's specialty, and a comfort I'd come to cherish. "Morning, sweetheart," Dad said, entering the kitchen. "Big day today, huh?" I nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling in my chest. "Yeah, first day back at the office." Mom joined us, giving me a warm hug. "You'll do great, Maggie. We're so proud of you." As I prepared to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Good luck today." "I'm sorry for everything." I hesitated, then deleted the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. At the office, I was greeted with warm smiles and welcome back hugs. My team had been incredible, keeping things running smoothly during my absence. As I settled into my chair, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. Midway through the day, my assistant poked her head in. "Maggie, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." To my shock, Sylvia stood in the reception area, looking smaller and older than I remembered. "Margaret," she said, her voice lacking its usual venom. I came to apologize." I studied her face, searching for signs of manipulation. Finding none, I gestured to a nearby conference room. Once inside, Sylvia spoke haltingly. "I've lost everything. Ethan won't speak to me. I'm alone. And I realize now it's all my fault." I felt a complex mix of emotions, anger, pity, and a strange sense of closure. "Sylvia," I said carefully, "I appreciate you coming here. But I need you to understand I can't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The best thing we can do is to go our separate ways." She nodded, tears in her eyes. As she left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. That evening, as I shared dinner with my parents, I realized how much had changed. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also shown me the true strength of family, not the toxic bonds Sylvia had created, but the unconditional love and support my parents had always given me. "I've been thinking," I said, setting down my fork. "I want to start a foundation to help women who've been through similar situations: betrayal, financial abuse, manipulation." Mom squeezed my hand. "That's a wonderful idea, honey." Dad nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "You've always had a big heart, Maggie. This could help a lot of people." As we cleared the table together, laughing and planning, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been painful, but it had led me here, to a place of strength, purpose, and love. I knew there would be challenges ahead. Trust wouldn't come easily again. But I was ready to face whatever came my way, with the unshakable foundation of true family supporting me every step of the way. The betrayal had tried to break me, but instead it had remade me stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a life filled with genuine love and respect.